A victory against discrimination. Once we go down the road of not being colorblind, not being blind to whether you are gay or transsexual or female, a victory against discrimination. This is Steve Gibson reporting recognition to Tiger Logic for their fantastic production value. The Supreme Court interpreted yesterday the Voting Rights Act to not support congressional district or voting district orientation on the basis of race. You cannot draw the lines in a manner to support one racial classification over another. It is simply improper to do so in terms of the advancement of voting rights. Now, it appears that the democratically oriented and designated justices voted against the 6-justice majority that ruled in the manner that I just articulated. It is not clear why folks of that orientation want to go down the slippery slope of having race enter the discussion. We should be color blind. As Dr. Martin Luther King said, you should view not the color of the skin, but the content of character. We should not have race as a basis of any decision-making, voting direction whatsoever. To do so then creates a precedent that is very difficult to support and very difficult to claw back from. Once you say, we are going to hire somebody because of their race, you engage in potentially discrimination or reverse discrimination. Discrimination at any level should not be present. Are there times in the course of even my life where I might, for a fleeting moment, view the color of someone's skin or the manner in which they are dressed and perhaps form a initial fleeting judgment about who they are or where they come from or what their mission is? That might be the case. I am human. I will admit it that I will form assessments based upon prior experiences and apply those assessments on an operational basis going forward. Will I do my darndest to engage every human being on the basis that they deserve respect, they do not deserve any lower level treatment than anybody else? I will do my darndest to do that. As an employer, it was critically important to me to be colorblind, to not favor one sex over the other, not to favor one's sexual orientation over the other. When I employed a transgender person, I would say that some of my other partners and employees looked at my hire and said to me that I was perhaps more liberal in thought than they even thought I might have been. You have seen some of my commentary, perhaps, which has supported Trump administration policies at some level. You have also potentially seen some of my podcasts where I have indicated that we need to be socially liberal, meaning that we should not have bias or government intervention in our lives. I want to make this very clear. Any tenet of the Republican Party that in any way, shape, or form would support discrimination or would in any way, shape, or form promote a policy that would subjugate any minority is inappropriate. I'm going to go back, however, to some things that Trump did and what Ronald Reagan did as well. One of the policy positions of Ronald Reagan, who was viewed as not exactly the hallmark of liberal mentality, was to support economic programs that would uplift minority racial sectors out of lower income strata. People did not recognize some of these policies. Now, some of these policies were incentive-based and were not government handouts. And it was deemed by Ronald Reagan that government handouts were going to do nothing more than subjugate those mired in the lower incomes and keep them there, keep them dependent, rather than help them migrate out of government welfare and dependency. Those policies were viewed as discriminatory against the minorities when they were exactly the opposite in orientation. When President Clinton came along and said the era of big government is over and transformed welfare to more of a workfare orientation, it took perhaps a Democratic president to do that politically and successfully. But it's clear now that dependency-based welfare policies are not something that we should ever turn back to. DEI is a nice aspiration at some level in terms of aspiring for diversity, but this notion that we need to equitably give an undue boost or advantage to minority people, we need to give them a handout. We need to better advantage them in terms of employability, employment opportunity, to somehow remedy the wrongs of the past, are going to do nothing but perpetuate any wrong that occurred in the past. Did slavery occur in the past, and was that wrong? Absolutely. Does that mean today that reparations are in order? You know, I have struggled with reparations as a discussion. I think an argument could be made at some level that some incentivizing program to deal with those individuals that were that had ancestors that were slaves, an argument might be able to be made for some type of program along those lines. But that's one thing compared to a systemic institutional program that supports one race over the other. If we do that, as I said before, we are setting a precedent. Where do you draw the line? When do you end the racial preferences? Do we then also have preferences based upon sex and sexual orientation or geography? Once we go down the road of not being colorblind, not being blind to whether you are gay or transsexual or female, or from one country or another, or have one religious faith over another, if we go down that road, it is a dangerous road to go down. In fact, going down that road with respect to religious favoritism would perhaps be the most pernicious path possible, but arguably one of the more justifiable ones. Can an argument be made that those of the Mormon faith are being prejudiced across the country and need a leg up? Can an argument be made that those of the Muslim faith or Jewish faiths are disadvantaged at times, and therefore some type of voting or hiring preference or educational preference needs to be instituted in order to balance the equation? Who is the arbiter then, as well, of when the balance is struck? These are all thorny questions, and the Supreme Court ruling against race as a basis of making any form of decisional framework, whether it would be voting or otherwise, is precisely the policy and decisional framework that we need to pursue, consistent with the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution. Now, what can we do, however, creatively and dynamically to uplift minority sectors that have been challenged in the past? But first, let me make an observation. And that observation is that, in my view, minority classes have come a long way in our society. We've had a minority president. We have a lot of elected officials, and the respect that has been given by the capitalist groups and the American voting public to otherwise minority sectors have been breathtaking in their advancement. Does that mean that prejudice doesn't exist? Does that mean that women are still viewed in a biased manner in the private sector, whether they be in law firms, whether they be in the C-suite or otherwise? Prejudice runs throughout society because we form subjective opinions and apply those subjective opinions, whether warranted or not, in a wide array of affairs. It is the way the human brain works. You're going to come off of an experience and apply that experience to something in the future. You may be way off in how you're applying it, and you need to be very careful and aware that you need to strive for the truth. You need to give folks the benefit of the doubt in most contexts that aren't safety concerns, and you need to not judge a book by its cover. But that does not mean that we have to have a systemic approach by way of government policy that institutionalizes race or any other bias category as a basis for policy. That is what the Supreme Court of the United States of America is holding. That is what is fully appropriate. What can, however, we do? What we can do is continue to have, first and foremost, an education system that is a public good that supports those folks that are in lower income echelons. We can have a public education system that actually works, that is getting rid of undue administration, getting rid of wokeness, getting rid of policies and procedures that subjugate lower income folks. There is absolutely no reason why our inner cities should not be suffering or should be suffering from the kind of educational systems that plague cities like Los Angeles, Chicago, and New York. There's no reason that we should not have systemic approaches to our educational system whereby the government supports lunches that are free, breakfasts that are free, after school programs that support working parents, that we have focused programs with respect to better student-teacher ratios. If we have to go to a 10-to-1 student-teacher ratio across the country so that every student gets the level of attention that they should, and we need to train and hire more teachers. And if that costs us another $100 billion a year, as opposed to having a $1.5 trillion defense budget, we have another $100 billion that goes to our educational system that supports building out and supporting more schools, building out and supporting more teachers, paying teachers better, but managing the pension deficits that are associated with inner city graft with respect to teachers' unions. These are all things that we can do. We can have better merit, or a meritocracy, I should say, and merit-based systems in our educational systems, so that those folks that are in the lower economic ranges are given the kind of education that can lift them out of their struggles. And we need to create safe environments within our inner cities so that they can go to school, feel safe, go home, do their homework, and feel safe. There is a fundamental mission that we have with respect to our inner cities that requires us to promote the kind of programs that allow folks not to be looking towards gangs, and understand that if they are well educated, that is the manner in which we can have everything that is aspired to by diversity, equity, and inclusion. Steve Gibson reporting. Please remember to like, follow, and subscribe so that I can continue to provide you this kind of content.